Hello, it's April 22nd, and this is a weekly Avalanche Center update with Jim Frankenfield, director of the center, Snowman Jim, a nickname for many years. So, the usual introduction, this is brought to you by, well, it's brought to you by anybody willing to donate to the Avalanche Center. We don't have sponsors, we don't answer to sponsors, we don't produce materials that help sponsors market, we don't have government grants at all. This is a grassroots project, and if you support it, think about becoming a member. So that's who supports it, people like you. If you find these weekly updates helpful, they're new, they're not widely viewed yet. I hope maybe next season they'll catch on more. It's spring, it's kind of late season. A lot of people aren't looking at Avalanche stuff. But you can help the idea if you like it by liking, subscribing, sharing, and all that good stuff. The channel is easy to remember. It's at Avalanche Center. Also remember we have a new Facebook group, which also hasn't been used much yet because it's brand new. And again, everything in the internet comes down to marketing and promotion. We just don't have the resources to do that, nor beyond a certain level of interest. Nobody here, me least of all, wants to spend hours and hours marketing stuff. So it's a grassroots idea, and if you think that a discussion group is a good idea, then use it, promote it, share it, and maybe we get people helping each other and talking to each other about avalanche science, avalanche safety, avalanche education, and all that stuff. There is another one called Avalanche Discussion Group, which has been around a long time, I think, and has 10 members and never caught on. Maybe this will have the same fate, who knows. Anyway, if you're looking for our group, it's a public group and it's Snow Avalanche Discussion Group. In addition to being a public group, you can post anonymously. A lot of avalanche discussions in the past have gotten heated. There's a lot of self-proclaimed experts out there, and sometimes somebody disagrees with them and they don't take to that too well. And sometimes people feel a little intimidated. And if you're not comfortable talking about avalanches or you think you're going to get shot down, you can post anonymously. That's fine. It'll be approved as long as it's a reasonable post. So it's intended to be an open public discussion without all that kind of crap, if I could say that. Okay, so that's what we've been doing. This week has been a little busy and the website's behind, and I'm behind on doing any more work or promotion on the Spring Avalanche course. We've been moving offices and workspace, so this is a new spot, you may notice. Got to work on the lighting. It's a very dark room, but I think in the end it'll be a better room. It's going to be better for my STEM teaching. Once I get my whiteboard up and another second cam, so I'll be using this for my teaching and also for any Avalanche Center videos. We don't teach Avalanche courses using video for a number of reasons, and that'll probably be the topic of other videos. But they don't demand your attention. They're kind of in the background. A lot of times you get distracted or do something else. I've watched some webinars and watched dinner at the same time or made dinner, and I'm not paying close attention. Our Avalanche courses have a lot of chance for interaction, and if more people are involved in them, we could set up some video meetings and discussions. But you need to read the material. When you're reading it, it commands your attention. So that's one reason we don't use video. You can go online and find all kinds of videos. You don't know who produced them. These days, courses are produced quickly, even more quickly with AI, and all the time and money behind them is in the marketing and not in the content. And we don't want to go down that path. So yeah, this is, I do use video though in lecture, and I use video when I'm tutoring and teaching STEM courses. So this will be set up to be a better studio for those things. We still have shirts. We sold a couple of shirts recently, so if you see, there we go. That's the back of the shirt. The front has our more traditional logo. You can buy these on the website. We have some Nalgene bottles left with the same logo. That helps support the Avalanche Center. So if you like our cool logo, and the skiing skeleton. You can check that out. If you're not a member, just go to the store. You should find them in the store. Our store's not too active for gear anymore. At one time, we were kind of the only online source for Avalanche gear, but now you've got REI and Backcountry and all these giants that we haven't been able to or tried to compete with. So we do sell equipment, and I hope to get that back in functioning better next year. It functions, but I hope maybe we'll sell some gear next year again. So I'm working on the store section. In the meantime, we do sell, of course, shirts and Nalgene bottles, so you can get them there. If you remember and you log in, there's a discount there for shirts. So what's been up in the last week? What's been happening other than moving? So I have a lot to catch up on. We're behind on non-incidents and things like that will eventually get caught up. And at the end of the season, we'll have summary and what can be learned information. First, I need to work on the spring course. It's kind of the end of the season for forecasting. I don't know about all of the Avalanche centers. I've seen that Jackson Hole is now ending. The centers in Alaska are scaling back. Scotland has ended. Northwest Avalanche Center has ended. So these centers don't continue in spring, and if you're climbing in spring mountaineering and you want publicly funded information, you're out of luck. If it's particularly significant conditions, they will issue some kind of statement. If you've taken any kind of spring course, like our climbers course, the statements they issue will be a statement of the obvious. I could get online and issue that in an hour just from watching the weather. It's usually because of a big new storm coming or just finishing or extended warming. And those two things are pretty obvious to anyone that's actually had a course that covers spring. So the forecasting season is pretty much over. It's kind of ironic because the length of the season doesn't seem to depend on the size and budget of the center. The Northwest Avalanche Center has traditionally been one of the largest in the country in terms of their budgeting, and there's also a lot of need in spring for avalanche information. There's a lot of climbing on all the volcanoes through Oregon and Washington, yet their season isn't any longer than anyone else's. So, and that season is now over. So you're going to be on your own soon. If you don't know how to manage spring avalanches, take our course. It's very specifically for spring. Okay, we don't cover a lot of the things level 1 winter course would cover. We don't go into things like persistent weak layers. We don't talk about how those form or how to assessment or anything like that. Again, it's oriented towards climbing, so it's oriented towards following the weather and planning a safe climb. Skiers can collect more information on the way. Climbers are usually starting at the bottom of the slope in the dark, and you can't collect information and change your mind halfway up an avalanche slope when you're going uphill, and progress is slow, certainly compared to skiing down the slope. So that's the orientation of our course, and it's coming into the season where you need that background. Okay, so those seasons have ended. What else do we have in the last week? We're still seeing some incidents. The only new fatality in the U.S. in a little while now was actually a roof avalanche in Brighton, Utah. Apparently, the victim was clearing the roof, and nobody saw him for a while and asked for a welfare check, and they found him under the snow from the roof. So he didn't have anyone with him, apparently, when he was doing this. And so, we average about one roof avalanche fatality a year. Some years there aren't any. A couple of years we had 2. Compared to recreational accidents, they're not a large number of them. But they are, of course, tragic incidents. And in fact, skiers and climbers should be assessing the risk and accepting a certain amount of risk and analyzing what they're doing. And roof avalanches often don't involve people that were doing that. I mentioned roof avalanches a couple of weeks ago, and in that case, well, the Avalanche Center was quoted as, and perhaps quite possibly misquoted, I don't know, but the media claimed they were suggesting you clear your roof. And I commented at that time that that might not be a good idea. You might be better off just trying to stay out from under the roof. And that's what people are now advising, including construction and engineering companies that build roofs. This person was clearing the roof, and the snow slid, and he came down with it. And a lot of accidents happen when people are clearing the roof of snow. At this point, it's better to let it alone if you can. If you have to pass under it, don't be alone and go quickly. Just stay out of the way of the snow. If it's a weight issue, you need to call an engineer or a company that can remove that snow safely. There are companies that come with a cherry picker and harness, and they have, they're prepared to deal with that. And in an extreme year like this has been most of the West, if you absolutely have to clear the roof, that's what you should do. If there are signs that the roof is under too much stress, you should call an engineering firm and have them inspect the roof and recommend what to do before it collapses. Because there have been roof collapses too. I'm not aware of any fatalities from that, but we don't really try to follow that. So that's the only new fatal incident. There was a cabin in Atlanta, Idaho, that was hit and destroyed. It looks like an old cabin that wasn't built very strong way, in a strong construction, but it's been there many years and never had an avalanche come close, and this year it was knocked out. In Canada, there was another snowmobiling fatality that happened last week on Saturday in BC. I've only skimmed that. Eventually, details will come out about that. There was an interesting one in Italy because it involved 3 aspiring guides that were on a training run or trip and got caught in an avalanche. The instructor or leader was caught and injured, but survived. And I think he had to go back uphill. He tried to search for the 3 aspirants with a beacon, and for some reason couldn't locate them or couldn't get a signal. And it may have been hard for him to do a better search if he was injured. I don't know what his injuries were. He ended up going to the hospital, and the rescue team came and recovered the 3 aspiring guides. That was in northern Italy near the French border somewhere. And they were actually on a training run or trip. So the survivor was the leader or the presumably certified guide trainer, and the victims were aspiring guides. There have been other incidents in the U.S., been several, I think, in Alaska. There was a serious one in Girdwood recently. I think it may have involved a broken femur. One of them did, and I think that was the incident that did. This was near in Girdwood. It was a deeper layer, and the weather was warming. And it's a little hard to predict some of this time of year. The snowpack is still in transition. It's not really a spring climbing snowpack, which has a melt freeze layer on the top, unless you've had a new storm or extended warming, and those are cases you need to learn about. But it hasn't gone through much melting and freezing. So as it warms, it's still consolidating, and it's still going through that process of turning into a spring snowpack, which is more predictable. And some of these failures as it warms will be on somewhat deeper layers. So we can't, first of all, we don't affect the deeper layers. Your presence on the snow won't affect anything more than what I remember saying is 2 meters, but that's quite deep. I think over 3 or 4 feet, your presence doesn't have much impact. The problem with something like a snow pit is that layer that's 4 feet deep, where you dig your pit, if you dig one that deep, if you bother to, take the time to do that, and you may find a weak layer. It might be 4 or 5 feet deep, and it might not seem very reactive at all. that same layer may be 2 feet deep somewhere else. You do trigger it, it's going to undercut everything, including areas where it's 4 feet or 6 feet deep. So these layers are not always at the same depth, and that's one of the problems with relying too much on snow pits. We really don't have a lot of information for accurately assessing deep layers and how strong they are. On a forum a long time ago, there was a comment by a guide, I think, and he was talking about it. There's a method, and in our level 1 course, we have a whole unit on decision-making methods that all have their different pros and cons. And there's one interesting one that I'm not sure it's as useful for in personal touring and such, but there's a 5 lemons method, and if you get a certain number of lemons, 3 I believe, then the layer is suspect. So it works more or less like that, and it has to do with physical properties. So to use that method, you have to find the weak layer and then check off these properties. And this comment said that it somehow tried to apply this to spring, and all the work on that method discounted spring snow, or not spring, discounted deep snow. So this method, even the people that came up with it said at the beginning, it doesn't work on deep layers. The reality is not much does. Your stability tests, I believe the saw propagation test may work well in deep layers. That might be about the only thing that does. So as far as skiing and climbing goes, there's not a good way to assess these deep layers. You can be aware of whether they're not. Unfortunately, the advisories are not out there to tell you that right now. It would be nice if it lasted a couple weeks until we had true melt-freeze spring conditions, but they're not out there. So be careful of warming. Be careful of the time of day. Ski in the right time of day. If the weather is warming, especially rapidly, be cautious and be conservative in your terrain. And it's probably a little bit early to rely on melt freeze conditions for climbing. Maybe some places that's setting up, but we're still in April. And we'll have storms at climbing elevations through June. I ski toured alone across the glaciers in Austria between winter rooms. And I know one year I was waiting out a storm in the first couple of days of July. And I had to stay at the hut winter room for a day. I like that time of year because people aren't there, the huts aren't open, and you can just enjoy it, go from one winter room to another by yourself. Once in a while you run into somebody, but not much. Skiers tend to quit, and then that's probably why the Avalanche centers quit too. They just aren't a lot of people skiing anymore. They start biking and kayaking and doing other things. So that's what's been happening. There's still some incidents out there, and there are others that occurred in the US that I don't know as much about. The other thing that just came to mind is that when I was reading about the Girdwood accident, apparently the climate situation there was a little backwards this year. So the situation in Girdwood and the coastal areas and Turnagain Pass, where they also had 1 or 2 large avalanches. I think in one case people were lucky and walked away, and I don't think either had too serious an incident. That area apparently has more layers and looks a little more continental than usual. It doesn't look as maritime as it typically would through the winter. On the other hand, Hatcher Pass, which is further from the coast and across the coastal mountains, is usually more continental in nature, and I believe this year they had a more maritime type snowpack. So remember, those things are climates, they're categories, they don't apply every year. And I remember one year in Colorado, they had so much snow coming so frequently, it was like maritime climate, and people were skiing things that usually they would not even consider at all in winter in Colorado because of the snowpack. But it was more like the West Coast, and they were able to ski a lot of steep things all winter long. So that was an unusual year, and it didn't fit the climate pattern. So here we are in spring. Next week, well, it won't quite be May. Next week will be the last one in April. we'll still have things to talk about for a while with the spring snowpack and climbing. And we probably will still see a couple of more incidents. We typically will during climbing season. The other thing about that is that they're sometimes more tragic because they are involving teams of climbers. So we've had some years where an incident could be 3, 4, 5, even 6 climbers involved. They don't always, climbing, and we talk about this in the course too, climbers don't always have the same risk management choices that skiers and snowmobilers and others have. There are other issues to balance as far as being roped up and crevasses and rockfall and other things that may have to be balanced against something as simple as going one at a time. That might not be realistic. So yeah, we cover that kind of thing in the spring course. I'm going to be getting back to work on that now, I hope. I've also been busy with my STEM tutoring with AP classes coming up. I've got some for university level, but I have a lot of AP level students, and they're going to be taking an exam soon, and that'll free up some time. And so I'm hoping now that our move is done, we'll get back to work on the website and the course. So till next week, that's it, and see you later. Bye.